Well, it's a rainy day in Pittsburgh, so we're going to do a video on refurbishing the Rockola 470 from 1977. A nice looking box, the so-called psychedelic lady. Comes in both black and white color schemes. Either one is desirable. Maybe the black's a little less common, but a good box. A box I think will be worth more in the future. So I pick them up when I can get them for complete, non-working, for under 300 bucks, and then we get to work. So we're going to go through about 6 steps in how I approach the refurbishing of these machines, and we're going to try to do it in under 30 minutes, and I'm going to try to not repeat what I've said in some previous videos, which a lot of the problems are common to these boxes 436 to 470. So let's get started. Here's the box we're talking about, 1977 470, the psychedelic lady. This is the black colored version. The white colored version looks similar when lit up, but when not lit up, there's a big difference. Any rate, try to buy a box that's complete, not working, and has at least a decent cabinet. Now this one has a couple little dings, but it's not rotted at the bottom. And then look at the graphics relatively carefully. If they're faded or stained or broken, that's a big negative, because really it's not going to be easy to replace them. So if you got a nice front door and you got a nice top glass and the cabinet's decent, then look inside and be sure everything's there. This is your credit unit, power supply, amplifier, and down here is the selection control panel. Look at your mech and be sure it doesn't look like anything is missing. If there are missing pieces, you can order them now. This is your keyboard and solenoid up top. So that's basically what you want to do. Get it home. If you transport it on its back, you might want to service the casters since you have easy access to them. I like a box that rolls around easily, so do that. And if there's some gross contamination in the cabinet, sure, go ahead and clean it out. Look for broken parts or dropped parts on the bottom, and of course there's always some coins or quarters behind the coin box there. So all right, let's go through the process here and get started. Here is the order of business, how I approach the refurbishing of these boxes. Number 1, service the line cord and the power supply. You got to be sure you're getting the right voltages. Everything starts there, including the plug. Now, a lot of these plugs, they were meant to have 3 prongs. The original plug has lost the ground connection, so I know this isn't professional, but at least it's safe, and you want to do this. Enough said. So the line cord and the power supply. Now, having said that, you go on then to this mechanism, including all 3 motors, the control by microswitches and selection lights. Third, I go to the selection system, the keyboard, credit unit, selection control panel. 4, I then service the amp and the speakers, connections on the output transformer. 5, I service the fluorescent lighting. And lastly, we go over the cosmetics. And if you didn't look at the casters originally, you would do that at this time. So let's go to the power supply here. I've taken this off the back door. These 2 relays are very important. I would at least take them off, clean the, reseat them, clean the connections to the power supply. This is the play control relay. Do the same with that. Now this little guy here, out of sight, out of mind, you think wall box, so what? But a lot of the connections go through this. They wanted to go out to a wall box, but instead they got a jumper plug, which puts it right back in. So you have to take this off and clean these connections. I've lost power because of this rascal, and I never really checked it until I had a problem. The fuse is 5 amp slow blow. This one had a 3 amp fuse in it. I guess that's okay. It's better than overfusing. Your other fuses are inside here, and they sit right here. And they're 3 amp slow blow. There's 2 of them. Be sure they're correct and not blown. And then you go over here and check all the diodes. There's several here, and there's a couple out here on the front door as well. Check the resistors, and there's 3 capacitors replaced. We've done that before. They're 100 microfarads here, and then over here, that's 100 microfarads in the back. and then 12, it's back in the corner there at 1200. I've mentioned servicing the circuit breakers before, and I showed you how to do that before. Refer to a previous video on that. 2 of these were bad, so what do? Well, you put an inline fuse in. That's all you can do, and I use a 2 amp fuse. Now, I'm also want you to pay attention to these gang connectors here. I have to take all these apart and spray CRC, WD-40, and then CRC, clean them and reseat them. Dirty connections are your enemy. So this guy, this guy, this guy, we already talked about the other one, and then this guy here. You got to do it. It can be difficult to get those off, but clean the connections, reseat them. And then I think that's about it for the power supply. Then you will put this back in the box on the back door, and then we're going to go to work on the mech. And when the mech's done, we'll just plug in the mech plug only. Leave everything, all the other plugs undone. The fluorescent lights, we're going to do that last. That's it for the power supply. Check the voltages here when you're done. Plug it in. I gave you a sheet on that on a previous video. I'll show it to you again here. This is what you should get. The mech plug at rest, you only get negative 33, 1 and 4. The other 2 voltages only come out when the play control relay activates, so you won't get anything off of pin 3 and 6 at rest. The selection system, Molex, check them there. Ground is 1, and then compare with your DC multimeter and AC, check those voltages. Very important. You got to know you got the right voltages. Same with the amp here. Amp power, 46 volts AC. Put the black lead from your multimeter in the center one there, and then check the top and the bottom. You should get around 46 to 48 volts. There's another voltage that comes in, minus 33. That's for the mute relay. And reject, not quite as important, but still important. We've mentioned this before. Okay, that's the power supply. We're going to go on to the mech. Here's the mechanism. Assuming there are no parts missing, the gripper bow is often frozen, and there's multiple videos that show how to unfreeze it with a heat gun, so I'm not going to get into that. But you do need to take off the gripper motor, the magazine motor underneath, the right-in motor, which is down there. You access it from the rear. And then the selection control box is under here, 3 screws. Let that release, remove the connections. And then you're going to end up servicing the right-in board, the right-in wipers, and then the readout board and the readout arm, which is down here. That comes off very easily. And then I should mention the wobble plate switch and solenoid up here. Be sure the connections are still there and that's serviceable. So let's show you some of the components now. All right, the gripper motor has the smaller gear on it. And don't forget, it has this shorter screws that secure it underneath. There's 2. Here's the magazine motor. It only has to go one way. It has a larger diameter gear. Those are the only ways you tell the difference. And the screws are longer that secure that. There are 3 of them underneath. This is the right-in motor. This is AC, 25 volts. These were 24 volts DC, so you need a step-down transformer and a rectifier to check the voltages. This one, you try to clean it if you can, or lubricate it. It's difficult. I just go in from this end here. I try to loosen all the screws and then try to pry open the lid here and throw some oil and WD-40 in there. These little motors are indestructible. I haven't had too many problems with them. Now, this is a selection control, the bronze selection control box under the mechanism. There's 2 screws that secure it. I said 3, I'm sorry, there's 2. This is very important to service this. There's multiple connections going on both sides of it to facilitate the record transfer. This is the reverse relay. Clean all those contacts. Check the relay for continuity. Check this 15 ohm resistor here. Remove 1 lead so you're sure that it's correct. That slows down the transfer arm. And these interlock guys over here, you have to clean all the contacts And when you put it back in, be sure that the one on the right, as you're looking in this direction, is overlapping the one on the left. This is the correct position for the rest. Okay, this one is on top. Now they alternate back and forth as the record is transferred, but that's how you want to do it. There's a couple diodes and resistors there. Let's talk about the turntable platter. These are the grommets, those 3 grommets. These things are original. The original ones are always dry rotted, and they transmit too much noise up to the turntable and into the sound system. So you must replace those 3 grommets right there. Oil, put a drop of oil here. Now your idler wheel has to be completely free of grease. Sometimes if they've been sitting for a while and have a divot in them, they'll make a lot of noise. I take these off and I put them in oil, and then when I need one, I take it out and I hope that they're flexible enough to not transmit a lot of noise to the turntable platter. Sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and pay $32 for a new idler wheel, but most of the time you don't. Be sure that spring that's under there is still working. See it there, right there? You have to have good contact here, completely free. Now you do want to oil here and oil some of the other components. In this box, for some reason, this was jamming over here as the record comes out. This whole process has to swing there, and it was jamming. You got to look at everything. I never had that happen before, but this is operated off the cam in the back. Now these guys are important. These microswitches here, there are 4 of them on the back. Sorry. Be sure all of the push-on contacts are clean. Sometimes they're filthy. Clean all of these guys. Take off the push-on connectors and be sure the push-on connectors secure snugly. Check for continuity. I can't emphasize that enough. These guys go bad. There's 4 of them. I just showed 2 here. This is that little alternating dog underneath. This is secured here at the back underneath, and then it goes up and down as the record side changes. And you must be sure that this little cam is free and completely lubricated with almost no friction, or you're going to bind and jam up your motor, your magazine motor. Okay, I think that's enough for that. Now I'm going to show you the boards here next. I've disassembled the mech. So this is the read-in arm, and all of these contacts need to be cleaned with either cloth and CRC or WD-40, and then followed up with CRC all the way around here. This is the right-in arm assembly. The wipers, you may want to just slide some, here they are. Yeah, slide some contact paper with CRC under them. This rotates around by the right-in motor. Now on the other side is the readout side. Again, you have the wobble plate switch up here. Be sure this little guy is intact. Sometimes it's broken off and this won't operate properly, but again, you have to clean all of these contacts here, and you do that after removing the readout arm. Now, you clean these contacts, check all the continuity. I want to bring your attention to this. This is the cancel hammer, and look how worn down it is. Someone had removed this because it must have been missing, canceling some pins. If that happens to you, you're going to have to find a replacement for this from an earlier machine, or scavenge 2 of them off of the read-in arms of a junker machine. But I'll just bring that up. Also, you got to clean all these contact. And see this wiper here, the spring steel that goes in there. It needs to be cleaned because that abuts this little button that hits the pins. And by the way, all these pins, you should clean them with CRC or the equivalent. They all have to make an electrical connection. This is on the readout side. You don't have to touch the pins on the read-in side, but on the readout side, when the arm comes around, it's got to hit these guys and recognize them, and there is an electrical connection. Okay, that's about it for the mech. I know this was a whirlwind tour of the mech, but we're going to go on now to the selection system. Before we go to the selection system, change the needle on your tone arm. you want to go with the, this is the M44 short cartridge, and the needle is the Robin's Egg blue one. They're available on eBay, and maybe Victory Glass has them multiple. They're about $18, but get the blue one, not the white one. I should have mentioned the light sequencers. This is your make selection light. You have to sort of, these are almost always dry rotted and broken off, so you have to secure it. I used a tie on here to keep it up, but you got to check these bulbs for continuity, replace them. There are 53 bulbs, or a couple are 257. Same over here with the light sequencer, which tells you which record's playing. You have to gently remove this, clean the push-on contactors, and make sure all the bulbs are good. Okay, now going to the selector system, start with the keyboard and push every button in 25 times and spray some CRC below where it slides down right along here. There's a couple sets of blade contacts here on the solenoid we've talked about before. You must clean those. And that's about it there. Now we go to the credit unit. Now the good news is with the 464 and the 470, you got rid of that ADR relay, which is a real problem child. So inside here, there's a 0.25 amp fuse that's missing. That should go right in there. There's a little circuit board here. There's a 22 microfarad capacitor. You should replace that with 100 volts. That's important. Then take it off, clean the contacts. Again, reseat the contacts here. Check the continuity of the cancel coil. I put it on free play before I took out that spring. I gave it some credit. And then this little switch here, be sure the contacts are clean on that switch. There's one of this was broken off, and I guess this is why it was in the spare parts bin. But remove the two push-on contacts, clean the base, and then reseat them. This is a very important switch for the selection process. And then the other component of the selection system is the selection control panel. Now, it has this complicated board here, and guess what? Usually this is good, so we're going to assume I haven't had a problem yet. Now, that's foolish to say because their problems will develop, but this is usually good. Just simply clean the gang connectors on each side and look at it. I mean, if you see any fried components, then obviously you got to deal with that, but most of the time these guys are good. What isn't so good is over here. You got to check the fuses, be sure they're 1 amp fuses. There's 3 of them. Reseat this K6 and K7 relay. They often get loose, and if you don't get first digit light, second digit light, this is where you want to go. Open it up and look. And then these guys here, there are 4 connectors here. This is the standard bus. Do not put these guys on the album bus. Put them down here and take them all off, clean them, reseat them. Very important. And then if you have selection problems after that, you may have to go down on the bottom of the machine and reseat gang connectors on the bottom, because the selection system goes through a lot of connections to get back and forth between the pin bank and the keyboard. So, okay, that's it for the selection system. On to the sound system. So you have the 48350 amp. We've talked about it many times. Again, reseat your mute relay. Be sure its contacts into the amp are clean. Meticulously clean this 6-prong volume control plug. Dirty connections there are a big problem. Be sure your pickup from the tone arm is in good condition and grounded and secure. We talked about the cartridge replacement, the needle replacement, and the M44 cartridge. I've discussed this 48350 amplifier in previous videos, but as of July 2023, this is what I'm doing with the amp. I mean, I checked the fuses. I should have mentioned that on top. They're 3 amps low blow times 2. And as far as the capacitors, yes, you replace all the CAN electrolytic capacitors, and they are listed here in the manual, and I have circled them. There's 22 capacitors that I'm replacing, and I've included in that 22 C5, C6, C9, C10, C12, C13, C26, and C33. These are the so-called tropical fish capacitors, these striped ones. These are not electrolytic, but they're going bad. So this is my routine procedure now. Those are the 22 I replace, the electrolytics and those certain, the ones I mentioned, the tropical fish capacitors. Now on the capacitor board, there are 2.25 amp fuses. Check those. Check these resistors. These are 10,000 ohms each. They go directly to the output. Be sure they're in tolerance. There are 5 capacitors there that get checked. These are your diodes. They're usually good. These guys, replace it with a quality capacitor. This is your AVC board. Not too much to say there. The transistors on this board have always been good. Now, that doesn't mean that yours will be, but usually they're okay. Now on the preamp board, we start to get into these dial resistors. All these dial resistors, whether they're on the preamp board or the driver board, rotate them, clean them with CRC spray, and then leave them in the mid position. I mean, that's what I do. And then the only one that needs adjusted then at the end is this red one. Will give you your bias voltage. You have to adjust that. I've talked about that before, but this is the only one I play with then at the end. All the others, I just clean them and leave them in the mid position. On the preamp board, this op-amp IC unit right here, it is 4 prongs on each side. Replace these. That's a 4558 unit. You can get it on eBay for less than $1 a piece. It's worth doing. They are failing. Also on the driver board, we've talked about many times, the PEC4, they look like a brown cocoon. I just simply cut them out and replace it with the 4 individual components, 3 resistors and 1 capacitor. It cuts down a lot of noise problems in the amp, and it's been effective. Now, as far as the transistors, again, the ones on the low voltage AVC, I've never had a problem with. The ones that are starting to go bad are these two, Q5 and Q6. They must be tested. They have been shorting, as well as the heatsink transistors, which I'm not showing on this video. I've shown it before. If a heatsink transistor is bad, then go back and look at the Q5 and Q6, because it has about a 50% chance of being bad as well. Double check these if you've got a heatsink transistor that's bad. And this is the tone control board on the front. Again, adjust the rheostat here or dial resistor to the mid position, clean it. But there are no capacitors here that have to be replaced generally. I did on this one because I was just playing around with it. But the main problem is all of these slide switches, the tone control, the bass control, they all have to be exercised and cleaned. Spray CRC underneath and exercise them a bunch of times, because again, they may not have been in the same position and they carry the signal. So please clean them. And then look on the other side to be sure there's no fractured solder joints. Just look it over. But generally, if you do that, this board will be good. Then next to last thing, on the tweeters, you have to open up the panel on the top. There's a crossover capacitor to 15 microfarads, 35 volts, to protect the tweeters from the bass frequencies. Please be nice to your tweeters and do them a favor. Replace that capacitor on each tweeter, and you can make one. You don't have to buy the $4 ones from Parts Express. You can just put 2 22 microfarad 100 volt capacitors, negative to negative, and then this is positive to positive, and that's what you put in and solder it in place of what the capacitor. This will come to an effective 11 microfarads, should be 15. Guess what? That's fine. Just do it, and it'll preserve your tweeters. Be sure your connections on the back, on that output transformer on the back door, are both on both channels are on number 4, and then check your speakers for the correct ohmage of the voice coil, and just look at the cones to be sure they aren't brittle or cracked, and you should be good. Okay, onto the lighting. So far in our power supply, we really haven't hooked anything up yet or plugged anything in. We're now going to the lighting, and there are 2 connections for the this is the upper light plug, and then the bottom, this is the lower light plug. These are 120 volts. Now you've got to go and check the ballast for each of those, and they should read more than 15 ohms. If the ballast reads less than 15 ohms, and we've discussed this before, please replace it. It should be closer to 20, or you'll get a short in the system. Then you've got your starters and the light bulbs. You may want to go to LED lighting, as the fluorescent bulbs are going to be difficult to get after next month. If you want to buy a couple extras, that's fine. One bulb will probably last you a lifetime, but still, LED is maybe a good option for the lighting. Last component is the cabinet. Now, hopefully you won't need any major cabinet repair. If there are major divots, you can use Bondo and then get some contact paper, sand it down, and use contact wood grain paper to cover it up. Hopefully, again, you won't have to do that. The chrome is generally pretty good. Just clean it up. Again, hopefully your graphics are good. Okay, well, we're ready to start plugging components back in now and testing them. Now I plugged in the box and I reconnected the turntable motor and the 2 light switches with the grounding. I will now put we'll start with the mechanism. Just plug that in, plug it back on, and then since you don't have the selection system here, just go over and manually flick a pin here. Okay, and be sure the machine goes for it. I don't have a record in this particular, so it brings it out, sets it down. You can manually reject it, but man, that tells you a lot of information. Both your motors work, your play control relay works, your read in and read out, your readout arm is working well. So now, if you know that, now let's go to the selection. We'll plug in the selection plug, okay? And then you should go up here and you should see, select any single, because you put it on free play. So now, make a selection, 1, 1, 0. The motor goes for it. All starts, things are looking good. If that didn't happen, you have to go over to the side of the cabinet, reseat these guys. But that's good. I don't have the amp hooked up yet, but so the selection system works, okay? Again, if there were a problem, the first digit light, second digit light didn't work or something like that, you would have to go to the selection control panel here, look at it, open it up, etc. All right, well, the last thing now is you plug in your amp and be sure that your speakers are connected to the front door. If you didn't do that, make sure you always have your speakers connected before you power up the amp. You should hear a puff here. There it goes. And now, I think we got ourselves a jukebox here. We'll select that same song. And we should be good. This is a lot of fun. These usually come back to life. Broken parts aren't the rule; they're the exception. Oh yeah! We got both channels. That concludes this video on the 470. I know it was a whirlwind video. I tried to cover material that wasn't mentioned in previous videos, so I did slough over a lot of issues, but if you look at the other videos on YouTube, my gosh, there's a wealth of information there. I hope this was worthwhile. Thank you for spending 30 minutes looking at it, and I'll see what I come up with for next time. Thanks a lot. Have a nice 4th of July.